Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters in the struggle for democracy and human dignity, I stand before you today to speak on behalf of the people of Tanzania, on behalf of their hopes, their pain, and their unwavering demand for truth. I speak of the recent elections in Tanzania, of a watershed moment when the will of the people has been betrayed, when democracy has faltered, and when a new chapter of authoritarian consolidation threatens not just one country but the entire region. The promise of leadership and the fall of hope. Let us begin by recalling a more hopeful era. For decades, Tanzania was governed by the Parti Chama cha Mapinduzi, CCM, under which the nation achieved unity, post-independence stability, and a measure of economic growth. There were real risks, yes, but many believed that the transition to multi-party politics would deepen democratic norms and strengthen civic life. When Samia Suluhu Hassan became president in 2021, following the sudden death of John Pombe Magufuli, a faint ray of optimism returned. Could this be the leader who would steer Tanzania toward a new democratic horizon? Might opposition voices, civil society, media freedom revitalize the promise of participation and accountability? But that promise has tragically been broken. What followed instead is a dramatic reversal, a retreat from democratic norms into a system of near unbridled executive power, repression of dissent, and a highly controlled, even sham electoral process. Why the 2025 elections were a sham? Allow me to state clearly. The October 2025 elections in Tanzania were not free. They were not fair. They were far from reflecting the genuine will of the people, and we must analyze precisely why. Opposition excluded. The main opposition party, Chadema, was barred from participating, its leader Tundu Lissu charged with treason. Reuters +2, Deutsche Welle +2. Another significant opposition party was likewise disqualified. The closing argument. Pulse 1. Without genuine alternatives, the electorate had no meaningful choice. Only the facade of an election. Media, digital, and civic space under siege reports show systematic suppression of journalists, human rights defenders, civil society organizations. Human Rights Watch +1. On election day, there was a near-total internet shutdown, silencing real-time reporting and citizen oversight. Who owns Africa? When the instruments of public scrutiny are severed, the electoral process becomes opaque by design. Electoral institutions compromise the Independent Electoral Commission, the legal frameworks, the political space were all shaped to favor the ruling party. FIDH-POP +1 laws were passed that undercut freedoms of assembly, expression and association. Opposition and activists were terrorized. Amnesty International massive victory in a closed game official. Results show the incumbent president winning with over 97% of the vote in an election where key challengers were banned from standing. AP News. Pulse 1-1 might celebrate that kind of dominance if there had been genuine competition, but there was not. The margin reflects a lack of contest, not a triumph of popularity. Crackdown on protest and voice. When the people, especially the youth, were disenfranchised, rose up to voice their dissent. The forces of the state responded with violence, reports of death curfews, crackdown on protest, appalling in any level of democracy. Le Monde Dauphin +1. Thus, what we witnessed was not a competitive contest of ideas. It was a coronation. A democracy in name but hollow in substance, a contrast with former leadership. It is worth contrasting the current leadership with the earlier era, not to suggest that all was perfect before, but to highlight how much has changed for the worse. Under President John Pombe Magufuli, Tanzania already experienced curbs on dissent, but there was still a semblance of pluralism, including oppositional voices, contested elections, civic debate. Under Samia Suluhu Hassan, alarmingly, that window has narrowed further. Many hoped she would chart a different course. Instead, critics say she has refined the playbook of authoritarian control. Al Jazeera, Pubs 1, where once there was at least a modicum of public accountability, now the institutions bend to the ruling party's will. Where once voters felt they might choose, now they feel they are being told to endorse. The difference is stark and negative. The role of the international community and African solidarity. If democracy fails in Tanzania, we all lose, not just Tanzanians. That is why the international community must step in and why African nations must stand together. International community should demand credible, independent investigations into the crackdown, disappearances, extrajudicial killings, intimidation. Reports from credible organizations show at least 200 enforced disappearances since 2019. FIDH+1 support transparent monitoring of elections, and when that is blocked, raise sanctions, restrict aid tied to democratic governance, offer technical support for electoral reform, strengthening independent commissions, unlocking digital space, enabling civic participation. Firmly affirm that elections without choice, without transparency, without accountability are illegitimate. Africa must also act. Regional bodies such as the African Union, AU, and the East African Community, EAC, must hold Tanzania to the standards of democratic governance that all member states have committed to. Fellow African countries should refuse to normalize sham elections. They must extend solidarity not only in lip service but in diplomatic pressure. African civil society networks must share lessons and mobilize across borders, because the strategy now being used in Tanzania can easily be exported elsewhere. How the Tanzanian model can be replicated, it is crucial to see that what is happening in Tanzania is not unique. Rather, it is part of a troubling pattern, a playbook that could spread, ban or disqualify the key opposition parties under legal pretexts. Deutsche Welle +1. Tighten digital and media control. Internet shutdowns, censorship, stifling independent voices. Africa TV Cleanse manufacture a near uncontested election, then proclaim an overwhelming victory. Use state apparatus to suppress protest, intimidate voters, curtail civic space, thereby eroding trust in democratic process. Present the result as legitimate under national law while ignoring international standards. Once these elements are in place, the facade of democracy remains. Election day, ballot boxes, observers, while the substance is hollow. And that is why the Tanzanian episode is a warning for all democracies in Africa, a eulogy for those who died in the struggle. Today, we remember those who paid the ultimate price for the cause of democracy in Tanzania. We mourn the lives lost, men and women, young and old, who dared to raise their voices, to march, to protest, to believe that their vote and their voice mattered. Let us honor their memory. Why the International Criminal Court, ICC, must step in, given the gravity of the allegation. Mass protests met with lethal force, extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, systematized repression. It is incumbent on the International Criminal Court to investigate. The situation meets several criteria: widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population, government forces or those acting under government control, violence in the context of an election and its aftermath. The ICC's involvement sends a message. When the state engages in such violations, there is accountability beyond national boundaries. Impunity must end. The Tanzanian people, and indeed all Africans, deserve access to justice, not just promises. Conclusion, a call to action. The story unfolding in Tanzania is not just Tanzania's story. It is our story. It is the story of human dignity, of political participation, of the promise of democracy. When that promise is broken, it weakens the foundation of governance across our continent. So I call on all of us here to raise our voices for the people of Tanzania, to amplify their demand for genuine electoral reform, transparency, and accountability, to mobile support for independent media, civil society, and youth movements that refuse to accept the ritual of elections without substance, to hold our own leaders accountable, because the model that silences opposition in Tanzania could be replicated. If be my, you're not vigilant to insist that no reform, no elections is a principle worth defending everywhere, and that electoral victory without choice is tyranny by another name. Let the sacrifice of Tanzanians, those who died, those who were disappeared, those who remain in fear, be the rallying cry for renewed democracy in Africa. Let us act now before the drift becomes permanent. Let us restore the will of the people. Thank you.